As I have mentioned before, you do not need to read notes or music in a technical sense to be able to play the guitar. You don't need to do it to take all these lessons that I'm giving you here. However, many of you probably already do read music. You were in band, you were in orchestra, you played piano, maybe you still do, and you may be comfortable kind of putting those two together. And that's great. If you already read, fantastic. But this is just a little bit of an overview for those of you who may not read but may be curious about it. First, let's talk about reading the notes on the staff. As I already mentioned in another lesson, the guitar only reads the treble clef. So if you are reading music in the treble clef, again, this is not reading tab or chord blocks or anything that we've learned, but reading actual music on the staff. The treble clef is the little symbol at the beginning of the staff that lets you know that it's the higher notes. The guitar actually spans pretty low to pretty high. So what we've done, as I mentioned before, is we've moved all of our music one octave higher so that it all fits on the treble clef. So when I play this E, my open E string here, what I'm reading is the very top space of the treble clef. But what I'm actually hearing is the bottom line of the treble clef. If that's confusing to you, don't worry about it too much. This is just a brief overview of how to read music and how to read notes. But just know there's a good reason for it. That way, the guitar, instead of having to read bass and treble clef, we just moved all the music up an octave, and now we can just read the treble clef. Cool. And why read music? Again, you don't have to, but when you're reading music, you're reading in the same way that everybody does who's a musician, whether they be a piano player or a flute player, or they play the triangle, basically. You're reading kind of a universal language, and then you have your own instrument's way of doing it, but you're reading that language that everybody understands. So it is useful, for sure. So if you don't read music, the musical staff has 5 lines. I'm going to put some various pictures that I just kind of hand drew up here. It has 5 lines, so it's easy to distinguish from tab as long as you count the lines, right? Tab's going to have 6 lines for the strings, and the musical staff will just have 5. The note heads are written on either a space or a line. And when you start, now they could, or if they're lower than that, we add extra lines. We just keep the main 5 lines of the staff, but if we get lower, we'll add a little bit of another line going down. So we can go down or up as far as we want. But we always just keep those permanent 5 lines there and just add other lines as we need them. They're called ledger lines, additional lines that we need. But all of the notes alternate lines and spaces going up and down, and they simply go in alphabetical order. So if I start, for instance, on the bottom line of the treble clef staff, that note is E. I would play it right here on the guitar, and we'll have some music that you can use to correspond with that. And then if I go up to the space above it, I just go up 1 note. I'm going from E to F. That's it. So if you're just reading music, it is just going up the alphabet. Now, the musical alphabet only has 7 letters in it because it corresponds to the major scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, and then back to do again. And so we only need 7 letters, or at least in most common like Western music. Other traditions use more notes than that, and that's great. But for us, for our purpose, we're just going to learn those 7 letters. It just goes A through G. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Those are the only letters we use. Then we do use flats and sharps, what you might think of the black keys of the piano. So we actually end up having 12 different notes, but we only need 7 letters. So what that means is if you're starting on that bottom line with an E, E, F, G, and then you get to that next space, it's not H, we go back to A again. So I teach my students, the musical alphabet, it's a little easier than the regular alphabet. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That's what it does. Now, that doesn't sound too hard, and it's not too bad. But you should also try going backwards, because we don't just go up in music, we go down too, right? G, F, E, D, C, B, A. G, F, E, D, C, B, A. Blah, blah, blah. Right? So that's a little harder. And believe me, I cannot start at Z and go to the beginning of the alphabet. But from G down to A, I'm solid. Have to do that a lot. But even knowing these things, it doesn't help you if you just see a note plopped in the middle of the staff. You'll think, well, if I knew what the one was below it, I could just go up a letter, but I don't know what that is. And that's why we have the tricks, the ones that even if you're not a musician, you may know. And it just so happens that the notes on the spaces of the treble clef spell the word face. If you start with that bottom space, go up to the next one, go up to the next one, go up to the next one, there are 4 spaces, you get F-A-C-E, face. So if I see a note on that 3rd space up from the bottom, I know it's a C. And really, that's the best trick there is just knowing face. And then if you see a note on a line, you could just think up or down a note from the note that you figured out on the space. Or, if you want to, you can also use a trick for if a note is on one of the lines. The one that you may even know if you never even played anything, because you've just heard people reference it, is the famous saying, "Every good boy does fine." That's what I was taught when I think I was 6 years old in my first piano lessons. And of course that works great. But I found these days that people are a little tired of the pretty square sounding "every good boy does fine." So you hear "every good boy deserves fudge." You hear my personal favorite, which I have written over here, Elvis's guitar broke down Friday. Kind of sticks in your head really well. There's a "empty garbage before dad flips." There's "even Garfield buys dog food." And then maybe my favorite is when students simply come up with their own. I had a student the other day who came up with "elephants grow big dirty feet." But the key is whatever sticks in your head is what you want to use. So you see that note, you see that top space, you know, oh, it's face, it's E, and I remember it's this E right here. And then using the notes in your natural scale, you can play using notes, and you'll figure them out. Again, as I've said many times, you certainly don't have to learn how to read notes to play guitar, but it is a useful skill, especially if someday you may want to also play piano or also play the flute or the violin, or maybe just do a little arranging or just kind of increase your knowledge of music. I think you'll be glad that you worked on it, at least to have a working knowledge of it, even if you don't read it super fluently. Now, what is probably way more important than just plotting a note on the staff is rhythm. And so I just put some basic rhythm here, and I'll have some other sheets that maybe I'll put as stills at the end of this video that again are just me handwriting some ideas about rhythm. I found that students sometimes respond better to handwritten things than just printed things. It's kind of interesting. So sometimes we'll use handwritten things, specifically if we're talking about theoretical concepts, because there's something just more kind of organic or natural about it. But of course, we'll just have printed music as well too. But I just want to cover a couple of basics here. Our note names are fractions, and they're based on the idea of a measure. So the most common amount of beats that we have in a measure is 4. Therefore, the most common time signature we see is 4/4. And I'll explain in another video more in depth what time signatures mean. But just know that most commonly there are 4 beats in a measure, and we name our notes accordingly. So the quarter note gets 1/4 of the measure, which is 1 beat. So a quarter note gets 1 beat. A half note, which is the one with the clear note head, gets 2 beats. If you put a dot on that half note, it gets 3 beats. We'll talk about dotted rhythm more in another video. If you just do a clear note head with no stem, the little line coming up is called a whole note. Takes up the whole measure. Now the key is, if we switch time signatures to maybe one where there's only 3 beats in a measure, 3/4 instead of 4/4, we still keep the same note names. Okay, so our note names are based on 4/4. By the way, 4/4's nickname is common time, which you may have heard before. You may have heard somebody say, oh, it's a blues and B common time, you know, something like that. Maybe you haven't. You're looking at me like, yeah, right, I haven't heard that before. But anyway, it's called common time because it is by far the most common time signature. Why? I can't answer you that, but there's something pretty natural that we all feel about 4 beats in a measure. So that is where the note names come from. Quarter notes, half notes, whole notes, things like that. Now, we also have the notes that come up with stems, you'll see them over there, and they have a beam across the top. And if they have a single beam, they're called eighth notes. And as you might guess, 2 of them go in 1 beat, or 8 in a measure of 4/4. Now, all of this theoretically probably somewhat makes sense to you, but actually applying it is what's important. So the number one thing you have to do to have good rhythm is you have to feel the beat. Cannot emphasize that enough. And you may be thinking, well, duh, of course, but people don't do it. We just start playing stuff and we're not actually feeling a beat. And everything we're learning that's theoretical is very visceral. It's very based on real feelings of the beat. So what we're going to try is I have a couple of simple rhythms up there, and we're just going to play our open E string. And I'm going to demonstrate for you this first rhythm I have here. It's a 4/4 rhythm. It's just 3 measures, and we're going to play the rhythm, and we're going to feel the beat. The beat's going to go this fast. And let's do this first top rhythm here. Ready, play. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, rest. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I forgot to tell you about the rest, didn't I? But I'll bet you figured out what it was, and it's on the paper there. So that is a quarter rest. There are other rests, half rests, whole rests, and we'll cover all that stuff, and you'll get to figure it out too. But it's more just the overall concepts that I want you to understand about how the idea of a rest exists. A quarter rest means you would do nothing on that beat, just like a quarter note means you would play for 1 beat. Let's go down and try our second practice rhythm here. Once again, just on our open E string, feeling the beat and playing the notes in accordance with that beat, whether there should be 1 per beat or perhaps 1 that gets held for 2 beats or eighth notes where there's 2 inside a beat. Let's try it together. Ready, play. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, rest. 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. You may hear when I play eighth notes, I count the beat of the first one, and since there's 2 in a beat, I'll say, for instance, 3, but then the second one I'll count using the word and. 3 and. Sometimes you hear people use the word te. 3 te. Same thing. So let's try both of those practice rhythms over there at the same time, one right after the other. Let's do it. This is kind of fun, isn't it? It's not as hard as switching a whole chord or something at first. It's satisfying. I hope you feel the same. Here we go, both in a row. Ready, play. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, rest. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, rest. 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. Now I'm counting the beats out loud with my mouth, as you know. You don't have to do that. I should have said that before. I would not expect you to do that. If you want to do it, it's great. But the most important thing, again, is simply to feel the beat and play the notes accordingly with the beat that you're feeling. We'll do more on rhythm in our more theory section, but I just wanted to do here in this beginning section just kind of an introduction to reading notes, if you're interested, and reading rhythm, which is probably very relevant whether you're interested or not. So good luck with that, and I hope it's starting to make sense. It'll just take some repetition, and it'll come to you, and you'll get more comfortable with it if you're not already.